Last year, I had gotten to a point where every single night, my belly would look like a massive pregnant balloon filled with air. It would feel so uncomfortable, but not just at nighttime, because during the day, I would have this feeling that there was bowel movements that needed to take place that were not taking place. And it was just this constant feeling that something was wrong inside of my second brain, also called the gut. It's actually called the gut, but we also call it the second brain. This part of our body sends so many signals to our brain and the rest of our body. And when something is off down there, it can affect us on so many levels. And I felt that so strong during this time of my life. And I had tried so many diets, so many different strategies, listened to so much different advice. And it wasn't until July of 2024 when I got to coincidentally be on the same island as Sophie Richard in Bali, who is the AIP expert. I got to interview her on this podcast, and she shared her journey with all of her previous struggles with bloating and lack of bowel movements and I can't say this word for the life of me, endometriosis. Oh my goodness. I think if you have this, then you know how to say it, and you know that it's hard for her to say. But she'd just been dealing with so many difficulties with her beautiful belly. And after trying the AIP diet, it healed all of those issues. And I was desperate at this point. So I decided to commit to the AIP diet for 30 days. And it was honestly life-changing. It healed my bloating and had a big effect on me in many other ways, which I want to dive deep into in this podcast episode. It's actually been a very much asked episode, like an after reflection, because I did make a podcast with Sophie Richards and I made a YouTube video on sharing my 30-day journey, but I haven't actually gone into depth of how it's affected my life afterwards. And so in today's episode, I want to share with you what the AIP does and how it works, what you should do if this is something you want to give a try. I want to go into the emotional and mental shifts that happen throughout, or that happened to me, the results and the breakthroughs throughout this journey, and then what happened afterwards as I was slowly, little by little, reintroducing food back into my system, together with a couple of final thoughts on this whole AIP diet, because it is extreme. And let's dive into what the AIP diet actually is and who should be doing it. It's only if you have tried a bunch of other different lighter, gentler types of diets, because this is a very restrictive diet, and it is only something you need to try if you've gotten to the point where you feel like you've tried everything and nothing has worked, that you'll want to go on such an extreme, cutting out so much foods on a daily basis that actually also is very beneficial in many ways. And you're just, desperate to find a solution for it, then potentially this is something you'll want to give a try. Let's speak about everything that you have to eliminate and then everything that you can actually eat afterwards, because what you have to eliminate is all types of grains. We're talking wheat, oats, rice, pasta, corn, quinoa, all types of grains. You also cannot have any form of dairy. So we're talking milk, cheese, cottage cheese, yogurt, butter, no dairy. You also cannot have legumes, which is like beans, lentils, peas, peanuts, or any type of soy products. You cannot have any nuts and seeds. And as we know, nuts and seeds are good for you. So this really is like the final resort if you feel like you've tried everything else, because you can't have nuts and seeds. You also can't have certain oils like canola oil or seed oils or sunflower oil. You can have olive oil though. Now, when it comes to vegetables, there is a type of vegetable called nightshade vegetables. And I did not know what this was before I started the AIP diet. So this is something you're going to have to just have a list of next to you to know what kind of vegetables you can and cannot eat. So nightshade vegetables is things like tomatoes, potatoes, as in white potatoes, because you can have sweet potatoes, which was something I ended up eating a lot of as my form of carb. You cannot have eggplant, peppers, chili spices like paprika and cayenne. Cayenne? I hope you know what I mean. Now, you can also not have eggs, both the yolks and the egg whites, because certain people are allergic to either or. And so also when you're then starting to take back different foods into your diet, then you'll want to first start with either the egg white or the egg yolk to know what it is that you're actually sensitive to, if you are sensitive to either parts of the egg. You also cannot, this is obvious, but have any processed foods. So obviously no protein powder, nothing with preservatives, emulsifiers, artificial flavors, gums, etc. The last two may be the most challenging for you. At least the last one was the most challenging for me, because you cannot have sugar, which is fine. We're talking maple syrup, honey, sugar substitutes, anything like that. But the last one is no alcohol, which for me was fine. Maybe for some people that's going to be a challenge, but you also cannot have any caffeine. And that means the specific teas that have caffeine in them and coffee. No caffeine at all. And this did have an effect on me, and we'll talk about it. But first, let me share what you actually can eat on the AIP diet, because what you can have, which was something I ate a lot of for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, whatever, is high quality meats. Fish, any type of meat that hasn't been processed. And it's very great if it's been grass fed. And for fish, having it be wild caught and pasture raised poultry and organ meats and just, high quality meats. Now, the vegetables that you can have that are not the dark shade vegetables, nightshade vegetables, is leafy greens, things like broccoli and cauliflower, and root vegetables. And that's where sweet potatoes falls in that category, together with carrots. Very happy that I could have carrots and squash. And when it comes to fruit, I had a little bit of an issue here, which I'll go into later, because you can only have fruit in moderation. But what does that mean when you're someone who loves sugar and you do not have a lot of options? That means that you eat a lot of fruit when your name is Prunella. So I learned that lesson, that actually too much fruit for me contributed to my bloatedness. So I had to cut down on it. They do say that you can have berries, apples, mangoes, bananas, but in moderation, like maybe 2 pieces of fruit or the equivalent if you're eating berries. And I, at a certain point, had way more than that, and that affected my bloatedness. But as soon as I stopped, everything just fell into place. You can also have fermented food, like sauerkraut and kimchi, as long as it's without nightshade, and also kombucha. You can also have herbs and AIP-safe spices. So I would just look up which spices are AIP friendly and which are not. And bone broth, which we love bone broth. And I think it's important to think of this as not being a restriction, but simply giving your body a break from the foods that may be irritating your gut, your body. And the reason that you're doing this for between 30 to 90 days is typically how long people tend to do this for, is to give your body a break from whatever is irritating it. And then once your 30 days, 60 days, 90 days are over, you slowly start incorporating a new food into your diet, into your system every 3 days. So for me, for example, I did it for, I believe it was 30 days that I did it for. And then the first thing I reintroduced was coffee. 3 days later. So you wait 3 days. Every third day, you can reintroduce something new. The second thing I reintroduced was milk, because that meant I could have milk in my coffee. And just with those 2 things, I felt very satisfied, very good. Oh, yes. The third thing I incorporated, I believe, was pepper, because pepper is something that you're not allowed to have on the AIP diet, which was one of the things that made it the most challenging, because I was traveling for a lot of this. I was in Bali eating out. And so every time I had to say, is there pepper in this? Or is there any way that I can not have it peppered up? That's one of the more challenging things, but it's possible, even when you're living a digital nomad life, which I was at the time. And then I believe for the last week of it or so, I was in Denmark, which again was kind of challenging with family dinners and stuff because, usually you put pepper on things and you have different vegetables in the different meals, but it's a sacrifice for sure, but it's possible. And I will say the first 3 days were the hardest, because the first 3 days I look up everything that I can and cannot eat. And because I was in Bali, I ate out all the time. There wasn't just like normal grocery stores around the corner. So I would be eating out a lot. It was really challenging. I would go and then I would find a place where you could kind of make your own bowl so that I could get some sort of plain meat where I would ask, like, please don't spice it up with anything. And then I would get the vegetables I was able to get, and maybe with sweet potato. I was lucky that underneath where I lived, there was a restaurant that was super healthy, and I was able to make foods that I could eat. But like things like dressing, I couldn't have on it. So everything I ate was so plain. And then obviously I couldn't have any dessert things. And for someone with a sweet tooth, that was very challenging at first. But then I would eat fruit, and that's where I kind of overdid the fruit. But after the first 3 days, the first week, I slowly started to adjust. I started figuring out, okay, what can I eat for breakfast and what can I eat for lunch and dinner? I just kind of found my way. And it was really just plain and simple. I did not get fancy with recipes or anything. I know some people would want to do that. I know Sophie has some recipes that are AIP friendly, but I just kept it simple, like fish or chicken or beef and sweet potato and some vegetables. Like that would be my meal. Just simple, clean, simple. At first, it was a little boring because like there was no sauce or anything with it. You can make your own ketchup. I tried making my own ketchup. I found a recipe online, so I could do that through carrots and like beets, blend it together with some other things. But the amazing thing about cravings is that we adjust to whatever it is that we're eating. So little by little, my taste buds would adjust to this new diet and I would start to really enjoy it on all levels. It felt delicious eventually when my taste buds adjusted. And I remember something that was wild to me was that suddenly fruits and berries just tasted so sweet and so good. It was like I found a new level of appreciation for the foods that I would eat. And it was just incredible. In the first couple of weeks, I didn't see a lot of changes, especially because I was eating so much fruit. I was still getting bloated and I was getting a little frustrated and almost questioned the fact that I had committed to this challenge. And I had committed, so I was going to follow through with it, but I just got annoyed because I wasn't seeing any changes and still got bloated. And then I realized that I was eating all of that fruit. So when I cut that down, at about a 2-week mark, I started feeling a difference in my body. I started feeling, absolutely incredible from a completely clear mindset way. I felt energized every day. I felt clear. I felt just good inside out in my body. That is the power of good nutrition, right? It's that it makes you feel just amazing. And I think also the fact that whatever I was eating that wasn't so good for my gut had been taken away. So it wasn't feeding into continuously having these gut challenges, issues. And I was eating just so clean. And at around 3 weeks, I was just feeling so good. So good. I missed my coffee, which by the way, let me just share that the first couple of days of cutting out coffee, oh my goodness, it was so hard because I was so tired, but I just happened to time it in a way that the first days that was it the first days? I think it was the first days when I went on in a retreat. I was just so tired and the retreat was meant to really just heal and cleanse. So I just remember sleeping so much because I just cut off caffeine from one day to the next. But what happens when you cut out caffeine? I believe I cut it down leading up to so that it wasn't from 100 to 0. That it was more cut down slowly. But what happens when you cut out caffeine, which I am absolutely addicted to, is that little by little, the body is so smart and it adapts. And eventually you're no longer dependent on the caffeine for feeling that extra boost of energy. And, at 3 weeks point, my body had definitely adjusted to the caffeine. My body had adjusted to this new incredible way of feeling in my diet. And I started to no longer get bloated. I was still having issues with bowel movements, which I still to this day take certain supplements to help me with it. And this has been a challenge that I've dealt with since I was a baby. So I've often heard people say, oh, it has to do with your physique. But this is something I was dealing with when I was both chubby as a child and also chubby as a teenager. So I do not believe that it has to do with that. I think there is something deeper going on that I still haven't fully cured. But just overall, after 3 weeks, I felt a massive, massive shift. I believe already after 2 weeks, but it just kept getting better and better. And as you know, I uncoupled. It was a long journey of figuring things out throughout the many last months of the year, speaking back and forth, figuring things out. But a massive thing happened in my personal life within that area during around that time, maybe weeks 3 or so. And I just remember thinking and even saying to family members, like, how important the fact that I was so disciplined with this diet at that moment, because it made me feel so good that it felt like every challenge I was going through during that season was easier to overcome because I felt that good in my body. I don't know if this resonates or makes sense in any way, but I can just say that when we feel good within, both from a mental standpoint, like I'm always taking good care of myself in the sense of I journal and I meditate and I try to, think positive thoughts and be nice to myself. Obviously that always will impact whatever else we're going through and it'll be easier. But the fact that I was eating so clean and had that clear mindset as a result of this diet helped me navigate these challenging times that I was going through personally a lot better, because what we eat affects us in so many ways. So I thought that was an important little thing to mention, that yes, it heals the body, but it really has such a big impact on the mind as well. But overall, energy, mood, my skin even looked better. It was more just glowing. My inflammation had gone down and my clarity was on another level. But keep in mind, it is a hard diet to stick to. So eventually, after the 30 days, I was ready to reintroduce some foods back into my system. And I already shared a couple of the things that I reintroduced, and I every 3 days would introduce something new. And I didn't feel anything when I reintroduced anything. And I think the reason for that is my issue has always been overeating something. Like I'll be obsessed with one thing and then I overeat that one thing. Also, I had food poisoning, which can affect the gut and can lead to some gut issues. I maybe for a long time had eaten certain foods that over time started irritating my gut. So I think the whole cleanse helped me cleanse out my whole system. And when I then reintroduced just a little bit, I didn't get any massive bloatings or any massive effects. And so now I've gotten back to eat everything that I ate before, but with the awareness of which foods make me feel at my best. For instance, when I was doing the AIP diet, I really noticed that when I eat steak and this clean eating diet or beef, like more red meat, higher fat things, it makes me feel really good. And so I've taken note of that and added a lot more of that into my diet. And yes, I'll have a protein pizza like you see me share, but the difference is if I have a protein pizza today, I won't make it the next 4 days in a row. Potentially, or at least the rest of the day is going to be something that is less processed. And I know what I need to do. And I have my days where I do a little bit more than I'm supposed to. And just doing this podcast and thinking back to all the changes this AIP diet did for me, it's an important reminder for me to continuously remind myself of, because it really, really just showed me the power of eating the right nutrition, eating as clean as possible. That doesn't mean I don't sometimes want to eat more processed foods and have a little bit of that as well, but knowing what makes me feel at my best, so that can be my base. And then yes, sometimes I'll have other things too, but having that as my base, together with grains, together with nuts and seeds. Like there's certain things that you're not allowed to eat during the AIP diet phase that are so good for you, right? It's not about the fact that it's not good for you, the foods that you avoid during that season. It's simply just to give your gut a break throughout this time so that it can heal, and then you can reintroduce the foods, and majority of it, hopefully, your body can now get back to eating. And I uploaded a YouTube video recently where I shared a lot of my high protein recipes, which I do eat, but I won't have all of them in one day. And I shared that in the YouTube video, but it was misunderstood by some people. So I'm going to have to make another YouTube video sharing more of what my actual day of eating looks like, because a lot of it is taken from this AIP experience. And then now, because my gut has healed, yes, I still have some bowel movement things that I'm working towards figuring out, but the bloating isn't there anymore. I really feel good in my body when I have this be my base. I still have Greek yogurt now again, and I have milk, and I have cottage cheese, and I have a lot of other things like I mentioned, but knowing what my body really, really works well with and what I should be mindful of not over consuming, let's say. And the cool thing is that I know that if I ever feel like I need a reset again, I know that yes, that initial first week is going to feel a little tough to get back into what I can and cannot eat, but it's possible. possible. It's doable. And by being consistent with it, it will end up making me feel amazing. And that's why I wanted to share this for anyone who's either asked or maybe potentially dealt with gut issues, that this could be an option, as in a final last option, because there are so many other things you can try, things you can cut out. And oftentimes, just like I knew when I tuned into my body, I already knew what foods made me feel good because I'd been listening to how my body would respond to different foods. And I think it's the same for most of us. If you actually tune in or take a week where after each meal you ask yourself how it made you feel, I think you do have a pretty good idea as to what foods potentially to be a little bit aware of consuming less of and which food you can go ham on. But if you do feel called to give this AIP diet a try, then hopefully something I shared in this episode was useful, because I have experienced firsthand how much having bloating and gut issues, how much it really can destroy so much life joy in many ways. And if the AIP diet is your final resort and it could help you in some way, then, that's awesome. And it's worth the little bit of annoying of figuring out what you can eat during the period of going all in on it. And you maybe also want to go back and listen to my episode with Sophie Richards, because she shared a lot of awesome stuff, like how on day 12, she had the biggest poop of her life, which I did see some changes within that area when I did it as well. So maybe that's what you want to do it for, to get that bowel movement of a lifetime that you've been waiting for. Sorry if this is gross for some people, but the people who've experienced it, they know what I mean when I say that. And if you have a friend who has struggled with gut issues, maybe send them this episode so that they can hear a little bit about it and potentially be open-minded to doing some research and figuring out if it could be right for them to do as well. I'm so grateful that you listened to this episode. I am beginning my April transformation challenge in a couple of days, and I would love to have you there. And if you're listening to this at a later time, check the description below, because I will have some other challenge or some other way that I can help you get into the best shape of your life, both mentally as well as physically. I love being a coach, and I love just witnessing these beautiful women and some men that get committed and decide to make massive shifts in their life and finally go for the goals, the dreams that they've been wanting for a long time, but potentially haven't had the structure as to how to do it, or just not made that decision that, okay, now is the time. I'm ready for it. I'm ready to get in that shape that I deserve and that I'm more than capable of. So check that out if you're interested. And I hope you go out there and have a beautiful day. And as always, remember that in order for you to grow, you have to challenge your norm. Bye.